Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be going through my January wrap up. So in January I did a whole load of reading. I really quite surprised myself with how much I got done. I did participate in TBRPG-a-thon and I read 7 books in 7 days, a lot of novellas. So in the month of January I read 4,516 pages across 12 books. The audiobooks were 58.8 hours long and I usually listen on 2 or 3 times speed, so it was actually less than that, but still. I read 1 contemporary book, 7 fantasy books, and 4 sci-fi books. 8 were adult, 4 were YA, 5 were audiobook only, 2 were ebook only, 4 were physical only, and then the other 2 were a mix. My lowest rating of the month was a 2.5, which I had 1 of. I gave 2 3 stars, then I also gave out 9 4 stars. And so that gives me an average rating of 3.7 for the month of January. Well, the very first book that I read in January was Spellslinger, and I was in a pretty slumpy mood at the start of the month. I was actually in the middle of like 3 books and I didn't finish one until like the 7th. So it was a slow start, but it got better from there. But the first one that I did finish was Spellslinger by Sebastian de Castell, and I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. So unfortunately not the rating that I wanted to give it. I was hoping that I was really going to love this series, and that just wasn't the case. Spellslinger follows main character Kellen, and he is supposed to be undergoing these trials, and he has started to lose his magic. So he decides that he's going to basically try and trick everyone into thinking that he still has magic when he doesn't. So then a mysterious woman called Various Parfax shows up, and she kind of says that she will teach him the ropes of trickery and all of this. And overall I did enjoy it, but it just didn't quite get there for me, and I was pretty bored for about the first 2/3 of it. So there was a really intriguing world building and like magic system that was in this book, and I feel like that was one of the things that like most had my interest. But I don't think it was like fully explored in detail. And again, this is something that I think probably in like his adult books, maybe he would like delve deeper into, you know, world building and all of this kind of stuff and the politics, because it is for an older audience. And also like it's also something that could be delved into deeper in future books, which I also would not mind. One of the main things that I hear when people talk about Sebastian de Castell is his writing style, and like how it's very humorous and all of this, and I just didn't really get it. There was like glimpses of it, but I just didn't find it that entertaining, that captivating. But as I said, there were glimpses, and hopefully I will see more of that. I did like all the trickery and the conning and all of that stuff, but I feel like a lot of that didn't come into play until later in the book, and that's when things really picked up for me. I was bored until about page 250, and then from there on, like, it was action-packed, it was fast-paced, it was just constant go go go, and I really loved it. I was so invested, and like that was like way higher. That was like a 4 stars, whereas like the first 2/3 were like a 2 star because I was just so bored. But the ending, it really was a really solid ending, but that obviously wasn't enough to make me like fall in love with the book. Yeah, and I feel like there was some pretty like standard YA tropes and plot twists, but there was also definitely some things that I didn't see coming, which is nice. And I just didn't really connect to the characters that much. I did like Various, and I found Kellen to be a frustrating character to read about, because sometimes he just felt very inconsistent, because he sometimes felt way older than he was, because I think he's about like 16 or something. And sometimes he felt way older and sometimes he felt way younger, and so that like really confused me, I guess, sometimes. Yeah, overall a 3 out of 5 stars. So then the second book that I read this month was Elantras by Brandon Sanderson, and I give this a 4 to 5 stars. And this was a really high 4 stars. I kind of debated giving it a 5, but I kind of sat with it for a little while and was like, no, it's a 4. So again, another one that I was like in the middle of for like a week. But I got there eventually. This is Brandon Sanderson's first novel that he got published, and this one is like a really hard synopsis to try and think of. So it follows this world where Elantras was once a beautiful place, and the people who lived there were basically gods, and then this event happened and it changed these people who lived there, and it caused them to like lose their magic. Basically everyone who is still healthy like moves out of the city, and like the city is like blocked up, and anyone who gets this gets just like shoved in there. And so that's kind of before the story starts. And then at the start of the story, the prince of this kingdom, he wakes up, he's now an Elantrian, and so in the very first chapter we see him getting moved out to Elantras. And then our other point of view is a princess who was on her way to marry the prince when he got shoved into Elantras, and when she arrives she is told that he has died, and she kind of sticks around and is trying to like figure out, because she feels like something sinister is happening. And I really enjoyed it. As I said, it was a really high 4 stars. It's my second favorite Brandon Sanderson book so far, after Warbreaker. Warbreaker has been my favorite. Like, this is a really solid debut novel. Like, it's like really good. Like, there definitely was like a couple of things. So my main issues with the story that like didn't quite get to that 5-star level is with the writing and the religious aspects to the story, which I think that's a reason why I don't fully connect with Brandon Sanderson stuff, is because there is often a heavy religious element to his stories. I'm very particular about ways religion is done in books because of growing up in a religious country, I guess. And I don't like it to be like such a driving force behind the plot, I guess. So I wouldn't actually have noticed a lot of the issues with the writing style, apart from the fact the audiobook and the physical book had different sentences sometimes. So obviously they like change stuff, make it flow better. And yeah, so I noticed like changes, and I was like, and I probably wouldn't have noticed that otherwise, but yeah, it did kind of like take me out a bit. And then, as I said, the religious aspects, there was another point of view. So obviously we have the prince and the princess, and then we have this other point of view. He is this religious figure, and he nearly sees himself as kind of like a savior, which I did not enjoy. I did not like reading from his perspectives whatsoever, and like that was like a saving grace of the book, is that his chapters were only like 2 pages long, and then I could get back to the characters I actually cared about. And like, because like that's the thing, is like his chapters did end up having very important information in them, so like it's not so I could skip them. Not that I would anyway, but yeah, I just wanted to move on past his chapters. So yeah. So the magic system I was really interested by, but it's definitely the weakest, or more the least explored of his magic system so far. I would say Warbreaker doesn't have like the most well-developed one either. Probably the most well-developed magic system has been Mistborn so far. Towards the end of the book, we definitely started to get more information, but it was definitely kind of slower to get built on. Which, speaking of, I want a sequel. Give me a sequel. I know he has like a million projects going on, and like Elantras and Warbreaker sequels are like the bottom of the list for him, but I want both of them. Move them up. Move them up. Because I want them. So the first 50% was pretty slow, but it definitely started to pick up the pace during the second half, and also like it got wild towards the end. But I loved the plot and the politics and the scheming. I love that, like trying to stay 2 steps ahead and all of that. And I love it when it's not, when like the characters do make mistakes and they do fail at things, because that is so much more interesting to me than them just being perfect and them having this perfect plan that absolutely goes flawlessly, and even the mistakes were actually already accounted for. I love when they make mistakes, we see the consequences, and then they have to try and rethink everything. And I love that, and that totally happened in this book, and it kept things interesting the whole way throughout. And then one final thing for us to talk about is these characters, and not just these characters, but like romance. Because if you told me that like one of my favorite elements of a Brandon Sanderson book would be the like romance between 2 characters, I probably would have laughed at you. Because like I did like the kind of romance in Warbreaker. Like there was elements of a romance in there as well. And so like, and I did enjoy that. But I did not expect it coming into Elantras, and they're not, like, he is in Elantras and she's there, and we just hear them that they sent letters to each other before they agreed to this marriage and all of this stuff, and so it's just her thinking like he seemed decent, and I was just I was screaming, guys. I was in love. I was like, I shipped this so bad and I did not expect this reaction from me. And so then the third book that I read in January was The Name of All Things by Jen Lyons, which I actually have here. The rest of them are like at home, so sorry. But I actually have The Name of All Things. This is the second book in the Course of Dragons series, and this one we actually follow a different main character from the first book. So in the first book we follow Kieran, who is a bard's son, and he actually finds out that he is a member of the royal family, and at the start of the story he has been imprisoned, and we see his captor basically be like, I want you to tell me your life story, and he's kind of confused about this, but he agrees, and so he starts, and then his captor is like, no, you started in the wrong place. And so then they also start to tell his story from a different point of time. This follows Janelle and her story, which is kind of happening at the same time as the events of the first book, which is really fun because you can see moments where they're mentioning something that has happened in this distant land and you're like, oh my god, that was totally Kieran. I really enjoy this, but I did give it a 4 out of 5 stars. Again, another really high 4 stars, but just a missing out on that 5-star because I think, again, another book that had a really slow start for me, but oh my god, can Jen Lyons write an ending? Like, they go crazy at the end. They absolutely wild, and it makes you like immediately want to pick up the next book, but you have like however many other books on your TBR, so you can't. And I'm so excited to get to the Memory of Souls. And so this series, I'm already in love with this series, and I'm only 2 books in, and there's gonna be 5. The 5th one's coming out soon. Like, once again, I was absolutely blown away by the complexity of all of this. The characters, the plot, the scheming, world building, the magic, the relationships between everyone. Everything is so damn complicated, and I eat it up. It was so weird because like it had been a couple of months since I read The Rune of Kings, and I guess like some things had like slipped my mind a little, and so I literally like a couple pages in and I was immediately reminded how much I loved Kieran as a character. He is so damn entertaining. He is an absolute idiot. Like he does some really stupid stuff, but he is so funny to read about, and I love him. I think that is one of the things that did bring this book down for me, is because it wasn't Kieran's book, it was Janelle's story, and I liked Janelle. I thought she was fascinating, and the part of the world that she comes from is also fascinating, but I just didn't connect to her the way I connected to Kieran. I do wish we got like a little more explanation of the magic system, and like we're slowly getting there, but I wish like I feel like things would be way easier if I understood all of the magic system. Also, there is a prophecy in this book, and the way that it comes together is brilliant. And yeah, so the ending, fast-paced, edge of my seat. Like, I was so damn excited, I could not put it down. It was so good. Again, another book that has like hints of romance that have me just like dying inside, and I'm hoping that polyamory will happen. I'm really hoping for it. So then we get into TBRPG-a-thon, which was hosted by Bro from Wandering Through Worlds, and I read 7 books in 7 days. 4 of them were Murderbot Diaries books, so I'll talk about them all together in a minute. Will I talk about them first? I'll talk about them first. So the Murderbot Diaries series follows a murderbot, and he has hacked into his own system and basically freed himself. But instead of, you know, like running away, causing chaos or anything like that, he just spends his time watching media, which is basically TV. This crew that he is with, suddenly really strange things start happening, like attacks and all of this, and he's like, oh, am I gonna help them or not? I had such a good time with the series. So the 4 books that I read were All Systems Red, Artificial Condition, Rogue Protocol, and Exit Strategy. All of them by Martha Wells, and I gave every single one of those 4 out of 5 stars, so to varying degrees. So the 4th one was my favorite, then the 1st one, then the 2nd one? No, then the 3rd one, then the 2nd one. So overall, the first 4 are all novellas, and they all create an overarching plot, and after the 4th book, I think a new plot starts. It was so fun. It was such a pleasant surprise. I've been putting this off for ages. It's always something that I'm like, oh, you know, for a readathon and all of that, good idea to have that, because it would be quick. And it was just that my first prompt didn't suit what I had planned to read. I was like, okay, I'll try this one. And I ended up reading 4 of them in a week. So I had such a good time. This actually gave me what I wanted from Becky Chambers. So back in, I think, November, December, I read The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and I did not get along with that book really. It just was quite boring to me. I didn't get the lovable nature of it. This totally gave me those like funny, sweet space vibes. And that's what I wanted from Becky Chambers, and I didn't get it, but I totally got it here. I had an absolutely lovable main character. The side characters were also very interesting, and then the dynamic between everyone was great. And there was also a hint of a plot. It wasn't like the most well developed, and I think it is best if you like read the four of them pretty quick to each other, because as I said, there is definitely an overarching plot to them all. Just a really like sarcastic, entertaining character to read from, and I had a really good time. Totally recommend the audiobooks. Like they were so good. The narrator did such a brilliant job. Like that very like neutral, but like also like a hint of like sassiness in there. And yeah, it was done really well. So yeah, so the second one was the weakest for me. It was different characters, and I didn't really connect to them as much. I didn't really care as much about the plot either. The third book was stronger than the second. Again, there was a character in the third book that I loved a lot. I loved the character so much, and I got very attached very quickly. And then the fourth book, we are actually back with our characters from the first book, and so I think that's why I loved that one the most, because that's definitely the group dynamic I preferred, and we got even more development of them, and we also got the resolution to the plot that had been building up throughout all of the books, and it definitely had the strongest plot of them all. And yeah, I can't wait to continue the series, but the next one is a full-length novel, so I have to try and work that into my TBR. Where the Drowned Girls Go by Shauna Maguire, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. So this is the 7th book in the Wayward Children series. In this entire series, we follow books that take place in the real world or in these magical worlds, and so children go through these doors to these magical worlds, and sometimes they get kicked out or they leave, and it can be very hard for them to come to terms with the fact that they are no longer in these magical worlds. And so this one is one that takes place in our world, and we kind of see repercussions from events in previous books. And I've had a very mixed relationship with this series, but this one, as I said, was a 4 stars. I did really enjoy it. The only other books in this series that I have given 4 out of 5 stars have been books that have taken place in the moors / with Jack and Jill. Those characters, that world, I absolutely adore. I think that really shows you how much I enjoyed it, that like this took place in the real world and all of that, and I still enjoyed it. It was quite dark and twisted. So we follow Cora, and she has been through a lot. She has been a side character a couple of times, and she's at the point where she just wants to forget everything, and so she moves to the other school that we have heard mentioned before, and we find out that some very dark and sinister things are happening in this school. I think that's why I liked it so much, because it had that very like dark undertone to it, which like places like the moors definitely had. And so I think that might be why, because like that dark, creepy kind of atmosphere was definitely there. Despite the fact that I haven't really like connected that much with Cora, I really enjoyed seeing her and seeing her development in this book, and her kind of struggle with, in their worlds, they are the heroes, but like what are they in this world? I really enjoyed that, and seeing her struggle and seeing her come to terms with things was really well done, I think. And it has made me more excited to continue the series. I was definitely, after I kind of read them all over the past like 2-ish years, and after last year's one where it was the 3 stars, I was starting to think that maybe this is a very 3-star series, maybe I should let it go. But I really enjoy this one, and so I'm kind of thinking I'm definitely still gonna keep going. So then the 7th book of the month / the 9th, if we're, because we already talked about all the Murder About Diary books, was The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness, and I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. And this was a really complicated book for me to rate, because some bits were absolutely 5 stars, like I loved them, and some bits I just like absolutely despised. So yeah, so a very up and down book for me. So takes place in kind of like a sci-fi fantasy world, and all of these like action fantasy tropes take place, and we just follow normal people doing normal things. It is completely a contemporary book, and we just see flashes of heroes in the background. And yeah, so it's just about the rest of them just living there. Well, some of it I just absolutely adored, and some of it I just really hated. Yeah, I really enjoyed the mental health discussions in here, and like they were incredibly emotional, and the characters in here, they were fully developed and they felt very real, and because of that they were so frustrating sometimes. Like you really, like, you wanted to just shake them and be like, can you not see that this isn't working out? And they were, yeah, they were so frustrating to read about, but you did definitely feel for them and grow to really care about them. Like the bond between this group of friends is like really something special, and we see it explored, the good and the bad sides of it, and the mistakes they make, and the times that they're there for each other and all of that. One of the best things about this book though was the way the story was told was absolutely hilarious. So you get so it starts with like chapter the first, and it has like a paragraph in italics which tells you what the heroes are doing. And so it is just so funny. It is making fun of every single like YA fantasy or action movie that has ever happened ever. So it was so entertaining to read that because it was just so damn tropey. And then you would just flick to our main characters of the story and they're just doing absolutely nothing, and it was so entertaining. So yeah, so I really enjoyed that part about it. And I think my main issues with it are in the writing. It got pretty repetitive sometimes, and it was very dialogue heavy, and also I felt like towards the end I didn't like how things happened, because I feel like he took the like joking about it like a little too far at one point, and it just became like kind of silly. Yeah, and there were some elements of the ending that I just didn't like, and I can't really tell you for spoilery reasons. So then book number 9 of the month / book number 10 that I'm talking about is The Bone Witch by Rinch Pecco. I honestly can't even really tell you what it's about because I've already kind of forgotten, which is not good. Follows our main character Tia. After her brother has died, accidentally raises him from the dead and then discovers she's a bone witch, and so she basically gets sent off to train, and we get flash forwards to the future where she has like separated from the group. And I think the whole book, I think all 3 of the books will be a journey to see how she gets to there. A fairly low 4 stars, which is pretty disappointing after the Never Tilting World and the Ever Cruel Kingdom ended up getting on my favorite books of last year. I truly adored that duology. It was so much fun. Like, it was definitely like tropey and pretty, like, it was like typical YA fantasy, but I really adored them, whereas this one, it just didn't have the same like charm, I guess, to it. It was still a good time. Like, it was a solid YA fantasy, but there was nothing truly interesting or mind-blowing about it. It was a solid YA fantasy. If that's something you really enjoy, then I would totally recommend checking it out. I'm very curious about the timeline, and that's definitely something that I think is a smart idea because it definitely keeps you interested throughout, and so that was very smart. I liked the characters and I liked the relationships between them, but I didn't love them. I wasn't overly attached. It was very just like, I like them, nothing more, nothing less. And then I do think my favorite element of the book was the world building and the magic system, which I think is also probably one of the elements that I like the most in the Never Tilting world. Like the way that Rinch Pecco kind of creates a world and the elements that they choose to focus on, I think is really interesting. I'm definitely interested in continuing, and I'm excited to see where it will go, but it definitely it didn't really impress me or anything. 2 more to go. So then book number 11 of the month was City of Dragons by Robin Hobb, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. This was a decent 4 stars. It was my favorite of the Rainwells so far, and yeah, I'm getting there with these. And also I read this in a day, so that was pretty good. So this is the 3rd book in the Rainwell Chronicles, which is the 4th series in the Fallen Elderlings, and in this one we follow a group of individuals who have been tasked with moving the dragons to a more suitable place for them to live. The first 2 books were definitely like a story, and I think the second 2 books are also going to be a story, and so this was the first half of this new part of the story. I enjoyed it more than the previous 2, but it was still the 4 stars. It just, the series isn't quite blowing me away enough to get that 5 star. I do think what made this my favorite was definitely the character interactions. The way that the characters have been developed over the past 3 books, and the way that like some relationships have evolved. is so good. Yeah, the weird like publishing stuff was definitely still evident in this one. This feels like the first half of a Robin Hobb book, where it's very character focused. We're getting the characters into place so all of the stuff can go down in the second half. And yeah, and so like we definitely like ended and it was like, okay, everyone is getting ready to set off for their goals, or they already have just like started towards their goal. I do think that we have found out some really interesting stuff about the world and the magic though, and that excites me greatly because I feel like it's very gradual with the magic stuff, and a lot of the time the magic doesn't even play that much of an important role in stuff, especially not in like the Fitz books, because it's just like, okay, this stuff, like the wit and the skill and all of that, like it's there, but like I guess Fitz just never questions why, how, anything about it. He's just like, yeah, it's just there. Whereas in this one we and also like in the live ships a bit as well, there's definitely like questions about, okay, what does this mean? Also, we got to see some characters from the live ships in this one, and seeing how much they have changed and grown since that series is... So yeah, I had a really good time with this, and as I said, 4 out of 5 stars. One final book to talk about, which is The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, and I give this a 2.5 out of 5 stars. So my lowest of the month. I'm very sorry to everyone. I sincerely apologize. So this is obviously such a well-loved series. The TV show has just come out and all of this, and I just felt nothing. Like, I did not dislike this book. So 2.5, like, that is why I gave it a 2.5, because I felt like if I gave it a 2 stars, that means I disliked it, and I didn't. But I feel like if I gave it a 3 stars, that means I like liked it, and I also did not. I just felt absolutely nothing towards this book, and so I gave it a 2.5 exactly. I just felt absolutely nothing. And that is so rare of a thing to happen to me, where I just have no opinions on a book. So my only opinion is I had no opinion. I don't even really explain the plot of it. There's this tiny village, and there's like, oh my god, how many? There are like 4 teenagers. So there's 3 teenagers who could possibly be this magical person reborn, and then there's also 2 other characters from this village tag along, and it's just them trying to get to the place that they're meant to be. So yeah, that's it. I've read a lot of Robin Hobb. I'm used to a big chunky fantasy book with pages and pages and pages of walking. But you know, at least when Robin Hobb is doing it, there's angst. And like, I care about the characters, so I love the walking. I love that walking in like Assassin's Quest. I ate that book up because he is just so miserable the whole time. What does this say about me as a person? We're not going to discuss. But in this, like, I did not care about Rand. He was so boring. I did not care about him, and so I did not care about his thoughts when he was walking. And I did not care about the descriptions of every single thing. So over-described. Like, and not in like a flowery, beautiful, poetic way. Just like wordy. And like, the writing wasn't bad. And I understand that that's just kind of more of a product of its time. But oh my god, wordy. I will say, the women intrigued me. And I'm like, is that just because I am a woman? Or is it because they were actually the most interesting characters? Yeah, so this definitely, it felt like a setup book. And like, I don't mind that, and I may or may not continue. Because like, I'm nervous about continuing because I always hear people say, oh, the first like 2 books or the first 3 books, they're, you know, they're a bit of setup and it takes, but like once you get through them, incredible. And then but then I hear some people say, oh no, the first 3 books, like they are incredible, but like it slows down around like book 4 to 7. And I'm like, what? Like, if I combine those 2 together, then books 1 to 7 are boring. And I'm not reading 7 books to get to 7 interesting ones. So I'm unsure whether I want to continue or not. But I think I'm gonna like give it a month or 2 and see if I'm interested. And I'm going to try and get to, I think they told me to get to the 3rd one. I can't remember who told me, but I believe I was informed that I should try and get to the 3rd one, and if I still don't like it, then give up. So that's the plan. I think the thing that interested me the most was the magic system and the like world. I feel like I just didn't get enough of that. So yeah, so those were the 12 books that I read in January. I talked way too long. I'm so sorry. And I'm also so sorry to myself who has to edit this. But thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, subscribe. And I'll see you all on the next one. Bye.